Thank you, Chris, for inviting me to talk here tonight. I don't have a clock that I can see, so I'm going to have to try and time this roughly right. But if I get near to sort of 8:15, if somebody could just wave at me, then I'll know that I'm getting near to the end of the slot. Yeah, so I've been doing wildlife photography since about 2010, when I took early redundancy from work. And I went back into work. That was my opportunity to really get cracking on wildlife photography. And since 2010, I've really pursued every avenue to use the photography. For me, there's no point in just having pictures that sit on your computer and things like that. So most of my work is, not most of my work, a lot of my work's been in the major newspapers, and I've been very successful in a lot of competitions. I also make my photographs available for the wildlife trusts. Again, Somerset, Dorset and Devon have made extensive use of them, and I occasionally get requests for submission to books, periodicals, and I'm more than happy to support those. You don't get paid for that sort of work, but you often get a free book out of it. That's the way it works, which is quite good. So you're probably all from Ilminster. This is a common slide I use. I'm obviously based in Ilminster. This is what I regard as my home patch. It's about max an hour and 20 minutes all inside that circle, so I love going down as far as South Devon. You've got Brixham, Torquay area, running up through to Dartmoor, crossing to Exmoor. You've got the fantastic Bridgewater Bay, the Steert Wildlife Peninsula, coming round to Glastonbury, the Mendips, and then coming round into the North Dorset area, all the way back into Poole. I've never quite got this far out of Poole Harbour, of Portland, but I've often taken boats out of Berry Head, so I've been in Lyme Bay. And there's an extensive amount of wildlife in there, and that's what I enjoyed photographing. Before I go on to wildlife, I always like to show something that I've been doing more recently. That's the snow on Herne Hill last week. I've got a little drone that I could just pop up. Most of the snow, if you'd got up early, most of the snow fell to the south of Ilminster. So looking to the south was absolutely snow covered. If you looked to the north, you could just see green fields and everything. So it was we were right on the edge of the snow line that morning. Okay, and that's just a view up in the Black Downs. Once the sort of snow had started to clear and the roads were open, I just popped up there and just stopped off and took a few photographs up in it, because you still had the chance to get the autumn colours in the snow. And there's the autumn colours. Earlier on in the year, we had flooding back in October, and that seems to be happening every year now. That's looking down from Windmill Hill, which is just the other side of Stokes and Gregory. So that's the River Tone. So Taunton's up here. There's the River Tone coming round. It's a lovely place to go and see the flooding in it, and that's Curry Moor. Again, that's all now flooded again this week. And that's looking over from Middleby Pumping Station, looking over towards Langport. And this is all controlled flooding. I think you had a talk last month about flooding. This is all managing the South Environment Agency and managing the floods, the water in the Somerset catchment area. But I just wanted to finish on the flooding thing. There's been a very interesting programme running down at Middleby Pumping Station, where they're trying to control the water on these 3 moors, and they're investing a huge amount of money in putting in a siphon that runs from Southmoor across to Westmoor. The idea was they were going to bore 2 400-metre channels to run the siphon under the River Isle. So they've got an area here where they're drilling, and they've come underneath here to make this siphon, so this will naturally drain off here into this side of the moor and then get pumped out into the River Parrett. It seems a very complicated way of moving water, but that's what they're intending to do. And that's a huge, if you've ever been down to the pumping station, this is the drilling site here. They drill through here under the river and come up the other side. These are the 400-metre pipes that are going to take the water out. The idea was this was all to be completed before this winter. It wasn't. That was the first flood. They panicked and had to start moving equipment out. That's the second flood. So they're going to have to come back next year and finish off the whole project. So they've had to clear the site, take all their equipment away, and then come back. And that's them desperately trying to get all the equipment out before it got flooded out.
So probably, does that mean that they didn't plan the work very well, or it was just extreme?
Their reasoning is that adverse weather conditions during the first part of the year delayed the start of the tunnelling exercise, and therefore they couldn't possibly get they didn't dare risk starting the second tunnel. for fear of it getting flooded out, which was the right decision. But I think it must be quite costly to whoever's having to cost that programme, because they've got to bring back huge cranes, huge tunnelling equipment, all the team, rebuild the whole site with all the porta cabins, start again. One final thing about flooding. We've obviously got a planning application for the old Horlicks factory off the River Isle, and this weekend, when the flood warning was right across that whole area. So they're going to build 150 homes here, and it's right in the middle of the flood warning for last weekend. I have my own thoughts about how that should be managed, but the field didn't flood, but obviously if it had come up any higher, it would have done. Right, that's my little party piece out of the way. That's how man tries to control flooding. What about nature's way of doing it? Beavers. They're the industrial heart of the waterways, and they control water in a unique way by building the dams. They slow the water down. They build little lakes. They are the industrial workforce that I think we should be seeing a lot more in our rivers. And I've been watching beavers for probably nearly 10 years on the River Otter. You can often find evidence of them. They're not difficult to spot where they've been gnawing away at birchwood and ash. This time of year is a great time to see them because there's no vegetation. Not to see them, to see the signs of them. There's plenty of vegetation that's gone down, and you can see these gnawings and nibblings wherever you have to go along the River Otter. I use night cameras. I've got little track cameras, and this is just a couple of beavers who have just tripped the camera one night as they come up the river. You can also find them gnawing at the big trees. And they come and they don't need to gnaw all the way through to bring a tree down. They'll often just go halfway, and then the wind will bring it down, and then they'll start chewing it up and deciding what they want to do with the bigger timbers. In the summer months, this is where you can often find them. They do love it when the vegetation starts to grow green, and you'll just find them nibbling away on the green vegetation on the edge of the riverbanks and on the edge of lakes that they've created. They're not as nervous with people as otters. You know, if you move around and an otter sees you, the otter will disappear. Beavers are quite more relaxed with people. They'll often see you and they've actually come across the river and said hello. They're not that bothered, and here's one doing just that. This is down almost at the source of the Otter, not the source of the Otter, this is down at the bottom end of the Otter, down at Budley Salterton. There was an area at I can't remember. There's a big mill down there. Sometimes I just lose the thread. I can't remember the big mill is. Otterton Mill. And it was just upstream of Otterton Mill. There was a lovely opportunity to watch a family there. And this was one summer's evening when the sun was out. It's lighting up the green vegetation. They do enjoy the Himalayan balsam. So that's a great way of getting rid of that sort of predator now on our waterways. It's taking over all the riverbanks and destroying the natural vegetation. So all the pictures you see through here are taken by me. So, and this is the one that actually came in close. It came in to nibble a maple tree, and it just literally came right across the river, and it was determined to have its nibble, and off it went with its branch to the other side. And that's probably to feed either young or sibling ones or whatever. It's all part of collecting material, which they'll probably keep these branches and then nibble off the bark. They'll eat the leaves and nibble off the bark. The pride and joy is obviously if you can find the youngsters, the kids. They're very buoyant, and they sort of bounce around on the surface of the water, unlike the adults that sort of tend to sink around a bit. They are incredibly difficult to see. This is 6 AM in the morning. I often go out at 5 in the morning and sit quietly, and so I know they're around and see if they pop up. Sometimes you get like 30-second glimpse, sometimes you might get a couple of minutes. And occasionally one of the adults will come just to check on her. They seem to be quite independent, quite a young age, and they're sort of exploring around. And it's also if the parents quite often have different places they want to keep the kits hidden away for the day, because they appear in different parts of the watercourses and things like that. And that's the one, this year was even harder to spot the kits, and that's one picture again taken at 8 PM at night. I had to wait, it was almost dark, and I just suddenly saw one nibbling away on a branch that had been left by one of the adults. So I think these are the perfect creature to help slow water down, hold water back, and do whatever we can to manage water more naturally in our environment. Again, you can get a bit of a sunset view. Here's one just coming across a lake with a bit of an orange glow in the background. And that sort of completes my little bit about beavers, just to sort of show that they are out and about there, and you can see them, and if you're lucky, that's the thing. But Otterton Mill's always been the best place to go. If you walk downstream from there, you'll often see groups of people in the summer months watching beavers. So we've just been through these sort of autumn colours. This one's up in the Quantox, just an opportunity to capture some of them. It's been really, really good this year. It's hung on for a long time, and the colours have been absolutely brilliant. But I'm now going to come on to a little bit about Exmoor. Again, one of my favourite places to go, and particularly some of the beasts you find on Exmoor. I tend to go mainly around Exford and Simmons Bath and across to Porlock. That's a really nice area I've grown to know and love. This is Cornham Brake, just up from Simmons Bath, where the River Barle twists and winds its way through the valleys. And again, this time of year, just about a month ago, you've got the full autumn colours glowing in the valleys. So what are the beasts I'm talking about? Could be Highland cattle. Lovely, friendly animals. Wouldn't hurt anybody. Some people get a bit nervous when they see these animals around. I do worry if they're going to lick my car to death, but and lick all the paint off it. But they do make glorious images like that. But the real beasts of Exmoor, I think, are the red deer. And we've just been through the rutting season, where there's a big stag in here with his harem of hinds. Obviously, it's their time for mating, and he's trying to hold as many hinds as he can get during the period that they're in season. I've very rarely seen stags fighting. I don't think there are that many now left on Exmoor, and each large stag seems to be able to command his own harem. But you can often find the more junior stags lurking around the outside to see if they can get a bit of the action. This was one such stag, not quite as old as dominant as the previous one, and he was watching me coming up a valley, and I thought he'd bolt and run off, but he didn't. He just stayed where he was and just watched me go around the corner. And it's because there was another youngish stag that he was also keeping an eye on, and they had about 3 or 4 hinds with them. And that's the 2 stags there. They're both looking in opposite directions. Normally they follow each other, but for some reason at this point they were more interested. One was interested in me and one was interested in the hinds. One of the arts of, I guess, wildlife photography is generally just be patient. And if you tend to sit somewhere on the fringes of a main rutting area, some of the more younger and junior stags will quite often they'll pass by as they're manoeuvring around the hinds that are on the fringes. And this is just one of those exact days when I'd seen the previous day, there were 2 or 3 stags in this particular area, and I just put myself on the other side of the valley and just sat there waiting. I've got quite a big lens on the camera, so I don't have to be too close. But sometimes the best camera you have is what you have in your pocket. And this morning I was walking down the Taunton Bridgewater Canal, and all I had was my binoculars and my phone, and there was a lovely otter on the other side of the river scenting a lovely patch. So I just was able to pop the binoculars up with the camera phone and just capture an image, just to remind me that there are otters on that canal. So this is one of the main rutting areas, and here's the dominant stag bellowing away, trying to warn all the other stags out of his area. I was very surprised with this one. I came across this one on the Quantox. I had no idea there were still some really big stags on the Quantox. And you can see the height of the gorse here. The gorse is really high, and he was very well hidden. And it was only when he started bellowing did we sort of realise that each other could see each other. And he then just quietly disappeared. He wasn't spooked in any way. He just walked off into the gorse and just disappeared. And I hope he's still around. He hasn't been taken by any poachers or anything like that. But while I was on Exmoor, I was watching a load of birds, in particular corvids, flying overhead with what appeared to be corks in their mouths. So I thought, well, there's only one thing, that if it's corks, there must have been a rave on the moor the night before, and there's a load of bottles and a load of corks, and for some reason, the corvids like them. So I thought, well, hang on a minute, oh no, there's a crow here now, he's got 2 corks in his mouth. So I got absolutely fascinated, so I stopped what I was doing and packed everything up and thought, right, I'm going to go and find out where these corvids are and see what's going on. And if you're a farmer, you'll know exactly what those are. It's cattle cake. And the farmer had just spread a load of cattle cake for all the cattle on the moor. There seems to be a lot more cattle now on Exmoor than I've ever known before. So I guess that's all part of establishing whatever they're trying to do on the moor and keep the vegetation down. So the cattle, he was on his quad bike throwing out the cakes, and the cattle were coming down to eat it, as were the birds. But where they were taking it to stash it, I've no idea. They were just flying and just disappearing quite a long way. So as I said, I'm jumping around in this talk because I wanted to try and cover quite a few topics in quite a short time. So I'm just drifting back now into sort of perhaps some autumn colours and forestry things. And different types of forests. So this is again up on the Black Downs, where the Forestry Commission have been and planted larch. Some people like them. To me, they're very dead, not much going on. It's not the sort of woodland I like and I sort of rush to enjoy. But sometimes if you just look a little bit further away from the main forestry commissions, you can find places like this, which, you know, that's why I'm saying the autumn colours this year were, I think, truly outstanding. And these lovely beech trees, and if you're lucky, you can get these lovely sort of clear avenues running down through them. And I could spend hours just sitting in woodland like this, where there's no one around, just enjoying it. And it was quite close to where I took this spot on that I actually flushed a woodcock out of a bramble patch. So there's a meadow just the other side. Through that gap there's a meadow, so I guess the woodcock would have been out eating, would have been just hunting for worms and things in the evening. And that's again that's up near Staple Hill on the Black Downs. Again, a slightly different interpretation of an autumn scene. You know, a lovely old gatepost with a bit of fungi growing in it. Autumn colours here disappearing into the mists. So when I'm out doing wildlife photography in terms of animals, there's always an opportunity to capture the landscape, and I try and work the two together all the time, because you can't have one without the other. The more formal side of autumn, of course, is Stourhead. That's the cottage at Stourhead, and then looking across the lake at the colours. And then that's a famous avenue of beech trees in North Dorset. And I can't remember the name of it, something like Moor Crichley or something like that. We've had some great opportunities for foggy mornings recently. This was one particular morning back in October. October. I've got a little drone now which I can fly. I'm registered as a drone pilot and I'm qualified as a drone pilot, but I'm not qualified as a commercial pilot, so I can't do commercial work. But I stick to all the rules and I follow all the rules and I make sure that I don't annoy anybody. So that's taken over a month, and I thought there was going to be a lot more fog. They predicted a huge amount of fog that morning. It was very thin and it was very naff, really, and it didn't really do much for me. But a couple of hours later, it had completely changed. And I'd moved location, and this is what happened. This is actually Turn Hill, High Ham. It literally rolled in like a blanket. Truly remarkable. As the sun came up, it completely transformed. This was on the 19th of October. And on the 15th of October, it did something similar. So this is taken from the Burton Pinsent Monument up at Curry Rival. And I'm looking to the east, the sunrise, and all you could just see was this blanket of fog rolling towards me. If I looked the other way, it was clear. I could see out across towards Taunton everywhere, but you could see this fog coming. And then here it is again rolling. I went out back to Turn Hill and just to see it rolling in across Turn Hill. So the Burton Pinsent Monument's just up here somewhere. So the fog actually came over the top of the Burton Pinsent and then dropped down into West Sedgemoor and then headed towards the Taunton Vale. It was 2 hours of just amazing watching this fog roll around. And you can just see it catching in the trees. But I went into trees then because often in woodland it's great to go fungi watching and looking, and you find these little fungi tucked away in the banks and in the roots and all manner of things, and there's a whole ecosystem with the mycelium and how fungi and trees live together in this unique combination. And they are beautiful things. You actually get down on your hands and knees and start looking at them. This slate bolete, it's like a little pin cushion, and it only lasts for just a couple of days and then it's gone. Absolutely remarkable things. Not all fungi are as attractive as that. You get things like this, which is witch's butter. Not something you'd particularly want to stumble on or put on your bread, I think, in the morning. Some people call it black butter, some people call it witch's butter. But there are other more traditional ones, like the fly agaric. There seems to have been an awful lot of slugs around this year, so this is all slug trails here. And both of these have been nibbled and eaten, and whether they develop into the full size, I don't think so. A lot of mushrooms and fungi I was looking at this year have been well nibbled. And then you get the classic bonnets. And this is a particular one I've never seen before, which was lion's mane. If anybody knows anything about fungi, this is a particularly sought after fungi because pardon?
It's delicious.
It's delicious, and it has a lot of beneficial things like cognitive brain power. It helps anxiety. Unfortunately, it commands quite a high price, and it's being taken out of the countryside as fast as it can possibly grow. Now, the growers have found a way to grow it in controlled conditions, and hopefully that will allow the wild fungi to exist. But it's a fascinating fungus to stumble on. It's actually growing in the beech tree just in there, and hopefully that one is still surviving and hasn't been dug out or cut out. And at the bottom of the beech tree was this lovely coral fungus. Trying to identify fungi, I think, is really difficult, and there's just so many thousands of them. But I do love just stopping and having a look and seeing what's around. And while you're looking for fungi, sometimes you hear little things going on behind you. And there was a little roe deer fawn, probably still a little bit dependent on its mum. I don't know where its mum was. And it was just sort of mooching around and just passing through the undergrowth. Wasn't bothered by us at all. But also, I mean, wildlife can be found anywhere. You know, so I'm just going down to the beach now. People probably may recognise this, Budleigh Salterton. And that's the entrance to Budleigh Salterton, taken with the drone. The entrance to the River Otter goes up through here. And if you've been down there, there's a whole new wetland complex down there which floods at the high tide. But there's a beach shingle bit along here. And there's currently some rather beautiful little birds taking up winter quarters down there, which are these things called snow buntings. So the snow bunting breeds up in the tundra, in the more northern things, and they come down normally onto the east coast of Britain for the winter, and often onto the near continent as well. We don't see them that often on this side of the country in the southwest, and there's 2 or 3 of them now. They're almost impossible to see in the stones. If they don't want to move, if you take your eye off them, trying to find them again is really difficult. And they are the most obliging birds you'll ever come across, because you can just sit there and they'll just hop around you. They're not bothered by people at all. They have no fear of people. You know, some animals, beavers fear people probably because they're going to take their pelts off them. But these birds have got absolutely no fear. When they breed in the summer, there's nobody around, so they come down here. The only thing they don't like are dogs, which I guess is Arctic foxes and things like that. It's a similarity, and they'll just fly off and then just fly back. But they're there for there's plenty of food for them, there's plenty of grasses, and they're coming down and eating the seeds in all these grasses, getting a good healthy diet. So hopefully they'll do well down there this year, and then they'll fly back to breed in the spring of next year.
Will they stay there? Or
quite probably they'll stay there. There's absolutely no reason for them to move, unless there's too much disturbance. But there's so much vegetation down there for them. They might disappear in terms of the River Otter's got a huge area now with this expansion. They could just disappear, but they obviously like that shingle area. And in time, I guess they will eat most of the seeds on the grasses down there, but they'll probably be there most of the year, most of the winter. So just look at some of the competitions I enter. There's one of the 2 big ones is British Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and at the beginning of this year I was highly commended with one of my pictures, and the other picture so this one was highly commended, and this picture appeared as one of the 250 in the book. The first picture, it just shows you what catches the judge's eye. This is Poole Harbour. That's a shag sitting on a manky looking buoy, but it was absolutely flat calm that morning, and a little boat had gone through and just made that very slight ripple in the water. And I think that's what caught the judge's eye. It was just something a little bit different. But the other one is the one I really like, and it's the frosty hare. And this was taken down on the Somerset levels. I'd been out a couple of times and I knew the hares were in this field, and I was hoping to catch one on a frosty morning. I didn't realise how difficult it would be to do that. The hare's obviously been hiding. It turned out it was a frosty morning with fog, so I couldn't see where the hares were, they couldn't see me, so I'm having to lie on the ground and hopefully that a hare will come past. This one did, and I just moved a little bit and it made him stop. He looked up, saw me, and you could just see he's obviously been out all night, or they are right all night. It's well frosty, and he's off to find something to eat. I've got huge admiration for hares. I mean, they're out in all weathers. And here's one on a wet day, absolutely soaked through, and they just have to survive in the countryside. They don't really seek cover at all. They just settle down in the grass and they just put up with it. As do us photographers, we have to put up with the frost and the rain and the heat and everything else. Right, so this is a little bit departure for me now, because I've often talked about my wildlife photography, so I'm going to just talk about some of the volunteering things that I do to try and put something back into the world of nature. Particularly curlew. Curlew are a bird that used to breed a lot in Somerset, and there's less and less pairs breeding now. Their strong point is still West Sedgemoor, the RSPB reserve there, but ideally we want them all to be nesting on all the moors, really, as at all possible. A curlew pair will live for 20 years or 20, 30 years. They can keep returning, they'll return to exactly the same spot nearly every year, and they may try to breed and fail for lots of reasons. And the idea is that I've been helping to monitor the birds to see how successful their breeding is. Because it's no good, because the population will crash. If you suddenly find after 30 years that your pair of curlew have raised nothing, then you're not going to have any success, because they're going to disappear and you won't get any curlew. It's very difficult for curlew to re-establish on an area. So that's, for those who have not seen, that's a curlew. That's a very evocative call you get in spring when they're looking for mates and defending territories. And this is one just coming into one of the meadows. And to find curlew in this sort of meadow is very, very difficult. So we've had various strategies over the years to try and identify where they are and where they're nesting. So what we generally do is we identify 2 or 3 places where we can watch a group of fields. So this was my fields for about 3 years ago. It's quite a big area. It takes a couple of hours to walk around all that lot. And we go at 3 times of the year between April and June. First time they call it Tier 1, and you're just trying to find out, are there likely any curlews in any of these fields? Then in Tier 2, you've hopefully narrowed it down, you've got curlews in this field or that field, and you try and work out how many pairs you've got. And then the really difficult one is to find out, have they actually been successful, and can you find any evidence of broods? That's just another picture of a curlew landing. So I love these opportunities because it gets me a chance to get out into the fields, work with the farmers, and I'm on my own. There's no disturbance, there's nobody else around, so I can just sit quietly and monitor the curlew and just see what's going on. It's very difficult, you've no idea quite to work out which field you're looking at. So we keep copious notes. So this was my Tier 1 notes, there's my Tier 2, there's my Tier 3. And we try and record where the curlew are, where they're flying, where they're going. And slowly you build up a picture of where you think there might be a nest. And I think in this year I worked out there was possibly a nest in somewhere down in here. So I talked to the farmer, and he agreed that he wasn't going to put his cattle into these fields, and he wasn't going to mow it until 1st of July. And that's crucial, because in order to have successful curlew nesting, you can't take silage from the fields. You've got to wait till taking hay sometime in July. And I think most of the fields around here and on the levels are all done for silage now, not for traditional hay. And that's the problem. The curlew don't stand a chance. So this was a farmer that was really up for trying to help the curlew. And on my final visit, I was determined to see if I could show evidence that they were successfully breeding, and I came across this curlew who was quite apprehensive, didn't really want to fly off, so I thought there must be something around. So as quick as a flash, I had a look around, and there's a little curlew chick in here. And you know, the perfectionist in me would love to have removed that branch or bit of grass to get it out of the way, but I didn't. I just quickly used my camera phone, took a picture, and then I moved away because I didn't want the youngster to get in any way in peril from a predator or get lost or anything like that. So that was an attempt, and that takes up an awful lot of time to try and find these animals. And sometimes you work in pairs, where if you see a curlew land, it may indicate a nest site, and you try and home somebody in on where the nest will be. So in 2024, we changed tack with the help of Natural England, who helped fund a trial using a drone, which is down here on a piece of cardboard, and and the idea was, could we use a thermal drone to spot nests from above? So we did a trial this year to see if we could actually do this. These are 3 of the guys from RSPB. And we had to do a lot of testing. We had to prove, could we actually detect heat signals? Using infrared camera, we wanted to detect heat. So we use those little pads that you quite often use in gloves, with little gel packs, warm them up and put them down in the grass to see if we could find those. We worked out that flying about 20 meters was about the right height to detect potential curlew. And there's a sort of sophisticated little program that runs over the images that we created that tries to identify where curlew are. This was a test day. This is where we've been walking. So this is just us heating up the ground just by walking. And that there is our test sample there. But there's obviously other red hotspots which are nothing to do with what we're looking for. But that is slightly more intense red than anything else. So that's sort of how we sort of calibrated the system to try and see if we could find curlew nests. Again, we have to go through, it's a disturbance criteria. You can't just fly on RSPB ground and naturally land without having the relevant licenses. So we've got the relevant licenses, and we also have to write a draft reports explaining what we're doing. My role really was just as the drone pilot, because I had the qualifications to do that. That's the drone up there. It's quite a big drone. It's bigger than any one that I would have personally, and it has to have an accurate. The drone will fly to an accuracy of the pictures you get from the drone is accurate about 5 meters. That's not good enough to find a 5 meter square. You spend too long trying to find a curlew nest. So this piece of equipment here gives you an accuracy down to 5 centimeters, and this is effectively what we did. You can program up a field, you can program the 4 corners of the field, tell the drone to fly it, and it works out a route to cover the whole field, taking sometimes about 1,000 images. We've got rid of the cardboard, we've now got a proper landing mat. There's a clipboard, so we have to record all the disturbance, we have to record anything that happens. So it's a fully automated system. It takes off, flies in, comes back. But you have to be prepared to take over. Anything can happen. You can get a flock of swans suddenly come up your drone, and you want to get out of the way of the swans. And we found there was very little disturbance. Again, we have all the fields numbered. So in each field I was programmed up, and we flew multiple times to try and find the curlew. And again, I hope I'm not boring you with all this sort of scientific reports that you have to fill in, but again, we had to record the weather conditions, the habitat, any disturbance, and this is all to do with mission profiles and any other useful information that would help the scientists who were going to compile the final report. So this was on a very misty day. That is a roe deer, and that's a curlew nest. So we did actually we found quite a few in the end. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't as easy as we thought it was going to be. And the infrared picture, so there's the roe deer again. The infrared is actually switched around, so that's the curlew nest down there. And there might be 2 more, there might be another curlew there. So the system does work. In isolation, there's another curlew possibly there. So it's an idea, and it did speed up the whole process. The idea is then that you put a little small electric fence of about 5 meters all the way around, and that stops the predators getting in. Unfortunately for this one, it's too near this river, so we couldn't fence it off, and it did sadly get predated. The predators are natural, so you've got marsh harriers, they'll take the curlew chicks. Some of them are ours, cattle can get in there, or cattle, roe deer, they can take them. There's a curlew just flying over the cattle. Foxes, they'll take them, and we'll crows. But what you basically need is a healthy, strong population of curlews, because the more curlews you have, the more territorial they'll be and the more they'll defend. So that's hopefully, if we can build the numbers up, then the predators will find it much harder to take out a nest. And if in the news last week, although it's not the curlew that we get into this country, one that's more in Europe, the slender-billed curlew, was actually declared extinct, and that's not what we want to happen to our curlew that come to our shores. I've also been involved in the Great Crane Project. This was started back in, this was an RSPB funded project to restore cranes to the Somerset levels. Has anybody ever seen any cranes out there? Yeah. Great, okay. So this has been a great project to be involved in, and it started back in 2010 when they collected eggs from Germany, or Poland it might have been, and they did it over 5 years and released a total of 94 birds. And it was in 2015 that they first started to breed and fledge, and then they've been going steadily since then. In numbers have been increasing. And the idea was to create a sustainable population of cranes in this part of the world. That's a typical looking crane, can stand 8 feet high with a 6-foot wingspan, and there's the rings that all the original adults were given so they could be identified as they move around the landscape. Typical place to find them in the winter months is on these old maize fields, because there's plenty of food for them to nibble away at. They're very nervous birds. If they see you, they generally disappear. They don't like people at all. Interesting, this was a picture I took of 4 completely unringed birds. And that's one of the reasons why I was involved in the project, because what they wanted to do was to find a way to ring the youngsters. So any nests that occurred on the Somerset levels, they wanted to try and work out a way to ring the youngsters so they knew whether what the success was of the breeding program. And again, here's 2 youngsters. So when they reach maturity, they're going to just look like adults. You're not going to know whether they were reared on the Somerset levels or whether they've flown in from somewhere else, because we are getting birds now coming in from other parts of the country. So what we did was we had to devise a plan to, or the RSPB devised a plan to literally catch a young crane. It sounds a bit barbaric, but it's not as bad as it sounds. So cranes generally overnight they retreat to somewhere that's very much waterlogged. There's an old lake area or something like that, and for about 3 or 4 days they'll walk out into a meadow the same way, and they'll walk into this meadow or that meadow. So once you know what route they're doing, you can set a plan to try and capture one of the little cranes. And they can't fly at this point. They're just literally, as soon as the adults will see the people, they'll take off, and the young cranes will just stay rigid in the long grass. But it's not quite as simple as that, because this all happens. And this is another example of how we changed from using maps like that to using Google Maps. So that's where they were roosting, and we were expecting the cranes to come out here into one of these fields, and here are the 4 of us ready to try and catch. I use catch. It's not catch isn't the right word really, to try and collect one of the little cranes. All this happens. They start moving as the sun comes up, and the young cranes. So you're talking June time frame. So you have to be in position 3 o'clock in the morning. So you're out in this field. It is absolutely amazing being out in these fields at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's amazing what you see. You know, you get otters will come past these ditches. So you just lie and wait. And we've got somebody on the nearest highest point telling us when the cranes are coming out and where they're going. And so we're all communicating on phones to work out which way to go. And then all we have to do is get up. The adults take off, and we know roughly where the youngster is. That's making it round sounds terribly simple. We only have about a 70% success rate, because if we can't find the young crane within about 10 minutes, we abandon it because we want the adults to come back to it. So this is taken after we've done a bit of crane ringing, because the sun's already well up by now on my Sedgemoor. I've been effectively on the edge of this ditch, lying there since 3 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the sun to come up. And you do get slugs on you, do get horrible things like that. But you do get these remarkable things. Sometimes you'll get roe deer just walk past you thinking, what on earth's going on? You know, why is there a person lying in the ditch? You say otters will come by, ducks will go up and down. So you want to remain absolutely motionless because you don't want to disturb the adult cranes that are coming across the field towards you. So there we are, there's a young crane just hiding in the grass, and their natural instinct is just to stay, you know, almost play dead. So you can literally just throw a blanket over them, and then you can just put the rings on them and then let them go. So I was there to sort of try and keep sight of where they were, and they're the team putting the rings on. So we now know that that's a successful will be a successfully fledged bird in a few weeks' time and be stomping around the Somerset countryside. And there it is, it's been ringed and it's heading off back towards its parents, who are still circling overhead, just calling to it, just to make sure everything's okay. Tries to fly off, but it can't fly. And there's a different one there. It's slightly, that ring on the left leg indicates Somerset because it's black, black, blue, black, and then that's its unique identifier, green, white, green. And this one's got blue, white, green on it, so it's a different bird. That is actually quite tiring, getting up at 3 o'clock, getting up to be ready in the field by 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, and that's just a record of all the rings on all the birds that were released, and then here's the breeding record. So we ringed one in that year, and we've increased it to 3 in 21. We did more in 22. We didn't have such a good year last year, but we've proved that, you know, that it is possible to ring the young cranes. And sometimes when you get up and head back to the car, you stumble on one of these things in the field, a little roe deer form, which you'd never would come across without doing anything like that. And that, to me, that's one of the sheer beauties of doing a little bit of volunteering like that. To get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and stumble on that. That was one of a pair. There's another one just over here, and neither of them moved as we just walked past. That's a very complicated slide, and I'm not going to attempt to go through it, but there are so many nature recovery programs going on in this area. There's a big one going on, a landscape recovery thing that's covering 4,000 acres. There's a climate resilient one, there's an adapting the thing on the River Brue. There's one on the Holnicott Estate. Somerset Council have got their own things. I just hope somehow all this is joined up so that they're all learning from each other and not just doing their own thing. So this one's over at Steart. This one's north of the Poldens. This one is south of the Poldens. That's RSPB, that's WWT, that's Somerset Wildlife Trust. It just seems a little bit disconnected, but I'm sure they do all work together. So back to wildlife photography. Ospreys are fantastic fish-eating birds of prey that nest predominantly either in Rutland, Wales or Scotland. But they have to migrate back to Africa for the winter, and certain rivers have started to be quite popular for them, and this year the River Axe at Seaton proved to be an absolute draw for the young ospreys. Some of these young ospreys leave the nest sites in Rutland, Wales and Scotland, and they haven't even attempted to fish. They've been fed all their young lives, and the adults then just fly off and leave them, and they have to head for Africa and learn how to fish before they get there. So often they spend a lot of times on the River Exe, River Axe, Poole Harbour, trying to learn how to fish before heading south. So this is, I'm sure most of you know it, this is the going into Seaton through Axmouth and down this lovely stretch of water. And the ospreys, young ospreys, were happy hunting in this sort of amount of water. You don't need high tide. You can see the grey mullet in the water, and that's what they were after. They were completely unbothered by people watching, and they did draw quite large crowds this year, because when you get 3 or 4 of them in the area, which is what happened, there's nearly always one hunting at any one particular time. If you just get one, and it catches a big fish at 8 o'clock in the morning, it ain't going to go fishing again until 1 o'clock. So, but when you've got 4, you can almost get a constant cycle of fishing. They are beautiful birds, and to say, some of them came incredibly close, but they're looking down at the fish all the time, because the fish are right on the edge of the water here. And you can tell they're young birds because there's white markings around the edge of all the feathers. So. This is a typical osprey diving. This one was ringed. This one had come from Loch Lomond. So they dive head first into the water. This one failed, so it's coming back up with nothing. This is just an example of how they actually start their attack motion. You can see the claws and talons are starting to open up, and then they throw the whole claws forward to try and catch the fish in the water. And I spent way too many hours down there trying to be in the right position at the right time. And eventually I got lucky. And I got one osprey that actually came hunting right in front of me. And I was really pleased with that. He actually holds his head up. He doesn't put his head into the water, so, which is unusual, I think. And then the osprey's got to learn. He's holding on to a fish. Can you imagine, he's got a heavy fish, he's been dragging in water, he's now got to literally hoist himself out of the water and fly off. I saw one that just couldn't manage it. He had to literally swim to the side, take a bit of a breather, and then he could fly off with the fish. But this one sort of calmed down, worked out what to do, and then started to fly off. And what was pleasing was anybody could go down and watch this. You know, this wasn't anything specialised, this wasn't laid on, you know, in a special hide or anything. You know, going down in sort of September time, and hopefully this will become a regular occurrence, because ospreys are breeding well up in Scotland. There's now a breeding pair in Poole Harbour, and that's all going to encourage more and more ospreys. And that's in now with a fish, that's Seaton Town in the background, and he's having a bit of a shake there, getting rid of some of the water. They're starting to put up nesting platforms all along the south coast, and to try and encourage ospreys not to keep migrating north. Ospreys will tend to go back, like curlew, they'll go back to where they were brought up. So every likelihood is they won't use these platforms until something happens. Either an osprey just happens to see another osprey when it's passing through the area and think, oh, I'm going to nest here, and then it'll start a whole new pattern of breeding down on the south coast. And that's a nice picture, you get two ospreys together. Sometimes people talk about luck when you're doing wildlife photography. Well, the Roman philosopher Seneca said luck is what happens when preparation meets an opportunity. And I noticed that Ross Brawn also said that luck is preparation waiting for an opportunity. And I totally agree with that. You know, you do make your own luck. So if you do the preparation and you know of the opportunity, that's when your luck starts. And I think that sums up the ospreys and you know they're going to come down in the autumn. Where are they likely to be? And then you can. And I just say give it 20 minutes as well, because nothing's going to happen instantly. So be prepared to wait is basically what that's saying. So just to illustrate that, I was trying to photograph red kites in Wales, and I particularly wanted the Brecon Beacon mountain range behind them. It proved much harder than I thought, because the site I had to go to, there's lots of buildings, there's lots of trees all around, and there's quite a short window to try and capture one with the Brecon beacons. There was a bit of snow, but it was round on this bit of the beacons, not the bit that I was photographing. But there's always an opportunity to go back and try again, because this is done at one of the feeding stations, so they'll always be there. Again, there's a white-tailed eagle project running on the Isle of Wight that's releasing white-tailed eagles into southern England, which is proving remarkably successful. And there's a pair now at Poole Harbour. So again, you learn about these birds. There's a boat trip that Poole Harbour, Birds of Poole Harbour run, and quite often they get quite close to them. And these are amazing birds. 8-foot wingspan, flying barn door. And they're just about to, hopefully they're going to reintroduce them onto Exmoor in 2026. So there's going to be a lot of eagles around this neck of the woods, I think, soon. But sometimes you come across, this is what I term as pure luck. Driving back from Poole Harbour along the A37 towards Yeovil, and there's an osprey sitting on a post alongside the road, completely unbothered by the traffic, with a fish. Now, if you've driven along that road from Yeovil to Dorchester, you tell me where there's any rivers. So goodness knows how far it carried that fish, and why it wanted to settle next to a main road and eat it, I have no idea. But this was done in April, so this is an osprey heading north, back to its breeding ground. Again, another example of luck. I thought I'd go and photograph frogs up in the Black Downs. There it is there. Very hard to see, very difficult. I gave up basically, almost impossible. So on a day trip out to Buckfast Abbey down on the edge of Dartmoor, one of their ornamental ponds has got frogs in it. So that was a bit, that's what I term pure luck. And that's a froglet or a toad. I think it's a toadlet actually, which is on the Dillington estate when I was walking around there a couple of years ago. And we've also got on the Somerset levels now, we've got these called Iberian frogs or marsh frogs. They're an introduced frog, not quite sure how they got there. And they have these massive air sacs that they blow up, and you can hear them chatting away to each other in sort of July time frame as they start their breeding season. Very distinctive croaking sound from these frogs. Right, this is my last bit before I take a break. This is the other bit of volunteering I do, and that's working with the Taunton Peregrine Project. A pair of peregrines turned up on St Mary Magdalene's in Taunton in 2017, and the church were very keen to encourage them to breed on their tower, and a project was set up to try and assist with a breeding attempt. We were quite lucky because both birds were ringed, and we knew that one bird had been ringed in 2015 and come from Exeter, and the other bird was ringed in 2015 and come from Bath. So it's a really good start to the project to be able to sort of know where your two birds had come from. So the plan was to, Mike Mallory, he sort of ran the project in the early days, and the idea, it was funded by some of the Society, the Falcon buses, and a bit of crowdfunding, and immense support from Common Security who put in all the cameras that we use. And really we were trying to set up a project that would provide a safe breeding area, 4 cameras so we could watch what was going on, and provide a monitor in the Minster, which is still there to show you what's going on. So we set all up in 2017 thinking, you know, let's encourage them to breed. And of course the birds do exactly the opposite of what you want them to do. And they first bred on the outside of the Minster. So if I just go back, that's the tower. So there's a flat top to that, just inside all those parapets. And there's one of the gargoyles sitting out on the edge like that. So we'd put that nesting area, which is a bit of gravel and a bit of protection, on top of the flat top tower, making the perfect abode for them. And of course they went from one of these things sitting out in all of the weather and the rain. Yeah, you just can't believe it really. But that's why they felt they felt they could nesting. Unfortunately, this all filled up with water. And she tried to get the egg out of the water and it fell off. But all was not lost. Somehow they realised the error of their ways and tried again. So that's the nest box. That's the nest box after nesting. But oh, hang on, I haven't got the sequence right here. Yeah, so they did actually then nest that year, and they raised one chick. They used the box. So they were a month later than normal, but they did actually succeed. So that's the normal nesting box. That's what it looks like, say, after breeding season. There's one of the cameras in there. There's another camera roughly up here on the church, and there's 2 that look outwards as well. So we've got sort of quite a bit of coverage of keeping track. This is traditionally how the courtship starts. It's a sort of bowing display that the 2 birds do to sort of re-establish their bond. Normally occurs sort of late January, early February, so you know you're in luck, you're going to have another breeding season. And it's very vocal, there's a lot of chatting going on. And then hopefully by mid-March, you're starting to see the first egg appear. Hopefully you get a full clutch of 4. 4's only the average. I should say these are not my photographs, they're taken from the remote cameras that we have on the tower, although I do a lot of the work with the remote cameras and capture pictures from them. I can't say I can't be up the tower with them. The birds are fully protected and no one's allowed to disturb them while they're breeding. So yeah, these are all the remote cameras. So ideally you want to, and the adult birds, they're so careful with the eggs, they fold up their talons and shuffle around so they don't damage the eggs. We've not lost a single egg to any sort of natural injury or injury caused by the talons. And this is just an example of incubation time. So during the night, the female's on the eggs, And then, so it's down here is the day, so it's 33 days before incubation, and here's the time, so it's going from midnight all the way through to 11 o'clock at night. And the male comes in and does his stint during the day. But generally, the female probably does about 70% of the incubation, although over the years he started to do a little bit more. But he's out hunting, he has to bring all the food in. And then late April, get the first hatching. That hatched probably the day before. There's the one that's just hatched and a bit of the eggshell. And then hopefully you get a nice bunch of four youngsters. And they're fed so gently. I mean, she pulls a little bit of food, a bit of meat off each of the starling or carcass or whatever's brought in, and just feeds each one in turn to make sure they all get fed. In the early days, I used to get worried that, you know, one of the birds wasn't being fed or it didn't look very well, but it's remarkable. They just get on with it. So I've become far less worried now as to they're not all going to make it. We ring them and we check them out. That's not me personally, but it's a professional team of, again, qualified ringers. So they take all the measurements, they measure obviously the beak, they measure the feathers, the size of the talons, and that helps to sex the birds. They also do a DNA swab, which goes to a national database. This just ensures that if this bird ever turns up in a collection somewhere, and the police have reason to believe it was taken from the wild, it can be identified. Obviously the rings are taken off. But it just gives us an opportunity to try and stop the persecution of birds of prey, because a lot of the wild birds are actually taken from the wild sites. They command a very high price. British peregrines command a very high price in the Arab world. And they are super hunters. And we had obviously a very wet. There is a little video I've got showing that when he starts to move around, that they have to put up with all weathers. And the advantage of the urban peregrine is that they've got areas where they can get under cover and stay dry. This year, we had an awful lot of rain in April and May, and the success rate on the cliff tops of Devon and along the south coast was very poor. A lot of the peregrines actually failed to raise any peregrines, but the urban sites were a lot more successful. So it shows the advantage of trying to get these sites up and running. It's just going back to the when we do the ringing, all the measurements that are taken, and it's all logged as who was there and the weights. So you see how the weights vary. The females are always a third bigger than the males are a third smaller than the females. So this is a male at 630 grams, and here are the three females of this year, 900, 840 and 860. That's a very big bird, that. This one's going to turn out to be a very dominant female somewhere if she survives. The success rate is not the success rate, the survival rate's quite low. 60% will probably die in their first year. Fledging is always a very worrying time. It's 163 feet to the top of that tower, and some of them just leap off and fly, other times they leap off and flutter to the ground. This was one year when one did just that, and I was called in to still say, what could I do to help? She took one look at me coming in my big gloves and just quickly hopped up onto the nearest high platform and then hopped up again and was gone, so she was fine. And that was her. I got it to the wrong way around. There she is on the ground, and she's hopped up already out of the way, and she's getting the wind under her feathers, and away she goes. This year we had a strange call from somebody on the cricket ground saying they had a peregrine on their balcony. Sure enough they did, they sent me a picture. I think it either got winded or it got somehow confused, but it spent the morning in the plant pot and then went off at lunchtime, so it wasn't injured in any way. It just for some reason wanted to watch a bit of cricket. And if you're ever in Taunton, they do sit up on the lights. You can often see peregrines up there, and they do actually enjoy the cricket. And here's some of the youngsters tail chasing each other. This is how they're honing in their skills for hunting. So now, these are now back to my pictures because I've taken these from the ground. So this is three of the peregrines all chasing each other. It's not an AI picture I've doctored it anyway. And here's an example of the prey coming in. This is a bit of a pigeon and the youngster. And the adults will start dropping the prey to the youngsters in a way to encourage them to start hunting for themselves. And that's a starling. There's the adult there. There's a youngster coming in to try and grab the starling. And there it's grabbed it. The adult's dropped it and grabbed it. And that's the sex phase. We've had 23 raised peregrines in the since 2017, which is pretty good for Taunton. I shall stop there because that's probably a good time to have a bit of a break.